And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another MindCep Podcast interview with one of my favorite guests who I had on this last year, Dr. Charryse Johnson. Dr. Charryse Johnson is the author of Expired Mindsets, and her most recent book, ladies and gentlemen, Get Off the Scale and Heal. So I'm super stoked to have Dr. Johnson on again on the podcast. She's a psychotherapist. She helps people from all walks of life heal their past traumas, build a better mind. And when we build a better mind, we can also, in a sense, build a better body as well, right? Because a lot of times, what you see on the outside um, sometimes is takes time to build. It's been built from what's on the inside. So, welcome back, Dr. Johnson. Happy to have you on the MindCep Podcast again. And today's episode is episode 102.
Wow, episode 102. First of all, congrats. That says so much. I can't believe it's been over a year, but I'm happy to be back and pick up where we left off.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I want to talk about, like just, talking about your new book,
Sure.
is a lot of, individuals in the health and wellness community, even lump myself in there,
Mhm.
is a big challenge that people have is they feel like if they look a certain way and they get to that level of the way they want to look, they're like, chiseled, rock solid abs,
Mhm.
huge chest if you're a guy, or if
Mhm.
you're a girl, like, big booty, toned legs. But then on the other side of that, so physically you might look and feel a certain way. You're like, oh wow, I feel great. But mentally, internally, you're like, oh my God, like I look great, I feel great, but mentally I feel out of
Mhm.
sync. So can you speak a little bit to that of like,
Sure.
how the health and wellness space, it's, yeah, they encourage like positive habits, healthy eating,
Mhm.
regular movement, but
Mhm.
sometimes what gets neglected is the mental component.
Yeah, Get Off the Scale and Heal is centered around the concept of just because you look well doesn't necessarily mean that you are well. If we think about it, a lot of us also want to look a specific way. Yes, because it might be something that we aspire to, but it's also a way that we want to be perceived and we want people to think that because we look a certain way, that we have it all together. So the whole premise of the book is really taking the time to make sure that you understand the motivations behind your wellness habits and that they are coming from a healthy place. And I think that that can be really important when you have something that happens in life that causes a shift or a change. You get married, you have an injury, you move, you get a new job. And if you're overly identified with a certain amount of rigidity and then you need to be more flexible, you may not be mentally well because you feel like I can't do what I've always done, what is happening. So really making sure that things are congruent. You're smiling, so that tells me you're like, "Oh my gosh, I feel that."
I totally have done that, and it's something I've been really continuing to work on.
Mhm.
And it's not easy because like I come from an upbringing where my dad's got, cleaning OCD, and
Mhm.
I kind of inherited a portion of that, but on the eating and training side, I felt like, oh my God, like if I miss a gym session, I'm gonna wither away and there's gonna be nothing left of me.
Yeah.
Because I was always a very kind of not frail, but very, very thin, like athletic kid. And I grew up playing a ton of sports. But I got to a point where I'm like, oh my God, like I've been running so much. I've been like, there was a point where I was running like 30, 40K a week. And it's just
Wow.
from soccer and lacrosse and basketball, I was playing all these sports at the same time. But I got to a point at the end of high school, I was like, oh my God, I want to put on some weight. Like I feel like
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
like my dad went to the doctor at kind of a similar age in high school, and the doctor's like, well, Doug, you gotta kind of cut down and
Yeah.
cut out some sports, right?
Yeah, and I see that all
Um,
the time with
yeah.
athletes. I work with a lot of athletes and, they are constantly having to focus on, I need you to increase the amount of food that you're eating when you're training for something and then how to balance that out. I wonder if you are similar too. I have a lot of people that I work with that are athletic and their appetite parallels their activity. So they kind of struggle when
Yeah.
they're not doing that 30, 40K a week, they don't have the same appetite. And
Yeah.
that can really then mess with you mentally because if you're not getting enough, you're not going to sleep well. Your emotions are going to be different, your clarity, your train of thought.
Yeah.
So that's where you really have to look at a more comprehensive idea of what does it mean to be healthy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like, your book, it speaks to that, and like your philosophy is like it's not about scale, it's not
Mhm,
about how you look, and I've really made that transition, and I want
mhm,
to let people know that, like, even if you're a little bit more obsessive, or you feel you have to be more rigid,
mhm.
that it's okay to think like that, but at the same time, my wife has also taught me, Alex, you're not a professional athlete. You don't need to
You can
train or eat.
relax.
Like, you can relax a little bit. You're not getting paid millions of dollars a year to train 8 to 9 hours a day.
Yeah.
If you're a professional athlete, it's a little different story. That's your career. That's what you have to do. That's what you get paid to do. So,
Mhm.
but still, being an ex-athlete, I still have that kind of like, I feel like I have to, even though I'm not in that
Sure.
space. And
Yeah.
that, but
It's
it's
your
gotten
habit.
exactly, but it's gotten a lot better. But my biggest thing I was taught was movement is the best medicine, and it can solve a lot of challenges, and flip the script, like give your brain a 180s to help you
Yeah.
change your inner state so you can respond better.
Yeah,
Um,
and movement is top notch when it comes to medicine and a support. We see that in research, we see that in practice. That fine line is also knowing, just like you said, and just like your wife is encouraging you, how to be flexible with yourself so that you
yeah,
also don't overtrain, get an overuse injury, have a moment where you're actually burnt out on doing the same activities. We see that a lot and I want to, go back to something that you mentioned earlier, because I think a lot of times when we're talking about like body stigmas, we often think of
yeah,
people that are in larger bodies, but we overlook that there are people who were very thin and small growing up, and that came with its own set of connotations, especially I think as a male, we see that a lot. So sometimes that whole desire of, I want to keep my muscle mass, I want to bulk up also is, I don't want to feel the way I felt before. I don't ever want anyone to look at me that way. And that can sometimes keep us, doing a lot of really hard activity because we're like, I don't want to be the way I used to see myself anymore.
yeah. And I think a lot of it also stems from because I was like bullied, and when I did
Mm.
start sports, I was last place in running. So it's like I
Yeah.
felt like I had to prove everyone, and I felt like I had to play catch up for a
Yeah.
while
Mhm.
before I started annihilating everyone. Like, I was like, okay, I'm not going to be dead last forever. Like, it's going
Yeah.
to change, and it took years of training, but it was
Mhm.
like 4 or 5 years. I was very young.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that's all I had to focus on was like, training and sports and stuff. But
Mhm.
that's kind of why that's never gone away, is because I was always the kid that
Yeah.
was a little bit undersized, not super big, not super small, but very fast. But I was muscle bound, but I still didn't feel like I was at where I wanted to be. So I always
Yeah.
felt like I was lagging behind, and I hated that feeling of like feeling like
Mhm.
I'm like behind and everyone's like light years ahead of me. That's all it
Mhm.
took for just to like the fire to just be ignited, and for me to wanna it just drove me to just punish myself in training.
Yeah. And in some ways, I hear that that drive was beneficial, right? At a certain point in your life, it helped you go, I can get better and I'm willing to do the work to get better. It's really like a classic example of an expired mindset. But then you get to a point in life where you have to go, I can't keep that same thought process
Yeah.
in mind. This is no longer a strength. Like people want to spend time with me and I want to spend 2.5 hours a day. I'm exaggerating,
Yeah.
doing
Yeah.
my
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
routine, and then it's no longer needed as a skill, to that
Yeah.
degree. So finding balance.
Absolutely. And like with your background as well, helping people again shift their mindset, mindfulness, meditation, kind of the spiritual side of things. What maybe since the last time we chatted, what are some things that have kind of shifted for maybe some of your patients, your clients,
Yeah.
of things, maybe breakthroughs on things that they've, let's say, struggled with in the past, but they just they just did a few tweaks to their
Mhm.
routine or added something in or removed something that wasn't serving them, and then they're like,
Yeah.
boom, aha.
Yeah. Probably one of the biggest shifts that I've seen across quite a few clients, whether that's one-on-one or even like in organizations, is their willingness to give themselves more what we call cognitive flexibility. And really recognizing that there is a lot of security in a routine. Routines and vital habits are very important. They're helpful for your brain, but we also need the space to have that level of flexibility. So I've really been encouraging individuals to go have your mindfulness practice, but also give yourself permission to go, depending upon how your day lands, it might need to happen at a different time,
Yeah,
or it might need to be a shorter amount of time, because I do think people who tend to kind of flow in that spiritual rhythm want it to ebb and flow the exact same way every day. And then they feel super off if they can't follow, and then it's become more of a bondage than, an
yeah,
open opportunity. But that tweak of being more flexible and going, this is something that I get to do, and it doesn't matter when I do it, even workout wise,
yeah,
knowing that at different seasons, depending upon what's happening, you may not have the same amount of time, but do what you can and then make up the rest of the time later. And that just really opens up the room for them to release some of the perfectionism
yeah,
around,
yeah.
this is what I love.
I really like that because there was a point where I was really like, I still am deep in the meditation and really been working on that for years. But
Mhm.
I feel like I like same thing. I was getting, becoming too much of a perfectionist again and like wanting to be like rigid, like 20 to 30 minutes has to be 20 to 30 minutes every morning. But a lot of times when you're stressed at work and stuff or your business and there's a lot going on, a lot of personal stuff going on, you can't, I physically can't be that rigid. It's just not working or
Yeah.
serving me. So
Mhm.
I had to adjust that, and because I still need to keep my mindfulness practice in because I know it helps me mentally for the day, no matter what
Yes.
goes on. So I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, I got to just dial back the time
Yeah.
and that way I still stay consistent, but I'm not like, 10 to 15 minutes is better than zero, right?
Yeah.
So,
And that's the key, what you said. You recognized, I don't want to completely let it go because it makes such a difference in my
yeah,
day. And I do have a set of people that struggle there. So my all or nothing thinkers struggle with,
yeah,
it has to be all this way or I can't do it. And so really just getting everyone to move towards that midline is actually a really beautiful space. It's not gray. It just gives you room to go in and out. And like you said, if you can't do the 20 or 30, 5 or 10 is
yeah,
just as effective, because it's the consistency
yeah.
that helps your neural pathways, not just the frequency in terms of or how long you're doing it.
Yeah, yeah, and that's something that I've been really working on. And again, my wife's helped me with that because
Mhm.
she's helped me alleviate some of my perfectionism like traits and ideologies, and because it just causes you more harm than
Yeah.
good. So yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and something that you mentioned that really resonated with me in our last interview last year was about, I'm gonna find it. It was a quote I wrote
Sure.
down. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So the mind is like a parachute and it only
Mhm.
works when it's open. So can you
Yeah.
elaborate on that a little bit more? Because I know we've already
Yeah.
touched on a few pieces, but I want to hear it
Sure.
from you.
Yeah, when we think about the concept of mind being a parachute and open, that is one of the most helpful things that we can do for growth, for our ability to develop as a person, or to also have different perspectives. I've been talking to people a lot recently about the concept of giving themselves permission to evolve, to intentionally decide you have the opportunity to change. There's certain parts of yourself that will always be where you are, but as you move through different seasons in life, you have to be open. And you think of someone who is like, oh, I'm jumping into something new, I'm getting off of this plane. But if they don't open their parachute, it's going to be a really hard landing if they're like, I'm just holding on tight. But when they open it, it allows you to take in new information. It allows you to learn. And that's the space where you can go, okay, I might need to drop weight, so to speak, symbolically. I might need to let go of the things that don't serve me well. And that's going to allow me to fly a little higher, using that analogy. But an open mind while staying centered to your values is one of the most helpful balances that we can have around mental well being.
Yeah, I like that because again, it's like over time, like you're talking about the seasons of life, there is some things that I've had to change going
Yeah.
from, like common law or going to single and then common law relationship and then to marriage, right? There's just things that
Yeah.
just have to change
Yeah.
and that you want to improve. And like one of those is communication, how you communicate with one
Hmm.
another.
Hmm.
And I'm someone that I'm a huge like proponent and advocate for mental wellness and
Yeah.
I'm someone that utilizes therapy because I'm still trying to figure it out, but I'm trying to get a formal diagnosis. I think that I'm on the spectrum of ADHD just
Hmm.
because of like how I think and speak and all that kind of thing. So, um, but and my therapist is actually she has ADHD.
I'm a
So
neurodivergent, so I can
yeah,
I can relate to that, and it is definitely a different way of life and a different way of thinking. And it's interesting because if we connect back to where we started, I find that a lot of my high functioning clients who are neurodivergent do use rigidity to keep themselves together. So it's their
yeah,
coping mechanism,
yeah.
especially if they've chosen to go a non-medicated route, that they're like, this pattern is what keeps me motivated and activated. And they don't always do as well when things are off or different. So it can be very scary to
Yeah.
let some of those things go. And you only want to let go if you are a neurodivergent a certain amount because you do need the consistency and you do need the anchors. Otherwise, you can feel very scattered and like, I'm not accomplishing anything at all.
Yeah, yeah, because one pattern that I've been trying to change in the past that I'm getting better at, and it's taking me a long time, is like it was all through my 20s, and I was like, oh my God, I look back and it's just like so
What is
much
wrong with me?
pain and challenges. And one of the things was when things got really, really hard, like I was like I would get scatterbrained and I like, let's say I'd be a year or a year and a half and do a job and I felt like I'm like, I gotta quit. I gotta give up. I gotta move on to something else. This isn't serving me
Yeah.
because I thought it was just like the job, right?
Mhm.
And that's something that I've been trying to improve because it might not it's not always necessarily like the workplace or the job. It sometimes is like just things that I just need to shift mentally.
Yeah.
Because one
Mhm.
thing that my therapist talked about was it's like a phobia or a perceived fear of rejection, like
Mm,
or
mhm.
the way that someone judges you or like let's say they're giving you constructive criticism and then I take it as it's like oh like
Yeah. Yeah, where you
feels
kind
like
of replay it in your head over and over again
yeah, and
to
it's
get
just
through.
like it's like a movie and it just doesn't shut off for me. Like other people, like it's like water off a duck's back, they keep moving forward. But for
Yeah.
me, in the past, I'm getting better, but in the past, it's like I just keep hearing that criticism over and
Over and
over and
over.
over again. And it's like so that's why like and I'm already very hard on myself anyway.
Yeah.
So when someone else criticizes me and stuff like that. I
It's
take
like
it
fuel to the
so
fire.
yeah, I take it so
Yeah.
personally, and I've learned that it's not they're not necessarily taking a jab at me.
Yeah.
They're just trying to let me know of like they're now I've reframed that mindset of like oh what just because they're sitting down to be give me constructive criticism, it doesn't
Yeah.
actually mean that I'm doing bad. They
Right.
just know that I have the capacity to do better,
Yeah.
and I'm just not there yet.
Yeah. And then,
So
I hear you exploring as you talked about maybe how you've grown up and then how you're a former athlete. Athletes tend to be very meticulous. There's only a right way to do things and expect a lot of out of themselves. All of those things can tie together. And I will tell people, so sometimes it's something that we need to shift, right? It might be our work to do with managing criticism, but there are moments where we're in an environment that is too activating for us
Right.
because a lot of both neurotypical people and neurodivergence. And whenever I say neurodivergence, I'm talking about ADD or ADHD for those listening, can have different moments of stimulation. But when that happens and we take things in a way that we can't receive well, we go into what's called dorsal vagal shutdown. And that is that part of us where we go into freeze. I don't want to talk. I feel really defeated. I'm quiet. I don't want to be here. What are people thinking of me? Kind of that fear and that perception. So there's a balance to also knowing, am I in an environment that knows how and is willing to speak to me in a way that I can receive it? And that just might mean, like, if I was your manager, that I would need to say, Alex, here are all the things that I think are phenomenal about the work that you do. And here's this one piece that I feel like if we make some tweaks, you could really just kick it to the next level. So it's also knowing when you're in an environment that's too harsh and then it activates you and you're like,
Yeah,
I'm not recovering well in that space.
absolutely. And do you see like people that have ADD or ADHD or some of your patients or clients, like
Mhm.
any case studies or examples of people in that space that for career wise, is there a lot of them that are in sales? Because I'm in sales, but I'm learning about myself as I grow
Yeah.
up. Like I
Hmm.
don't feel sales is suiting my personality.
Yeah.
It puts me continually in a fight or flight response more.
Correct.
So I'm
Yes.
really been trying to it's unfortunate because it pays well, right? It pays the bills. It's a
Mhm.
lifestyle that I've created and cultivated because I thought it's the road I wanted to go down. But I'm realizing um, I don't necessarily know if it's a forever
Yeah.
career.
Yeah.
I might have to shift like what I would want down the road. Again, depending on my mind and how everything's going with it. But I
Yeah.
would probably have to shift more into like a different role that's
Yeah.
not so like every month I need like I'm used to that
To meet
pressure
certain
every
sales goals.
yeah,
Hmm.
and I'm
Yeah.
noticing now that it's just not it's becoming more challenging like physically and mentally to
Yeah.
sustain that emotional turbulence.
Yeah, no, I can definitely speak to that. So, since we've talked, and this was just something that we just didn't get into last time because it didn't fit, I do half of my time is with one on one clients, the other half is in corporate wellness. So, I spend a significant amount of time talking to organizations and cultures about this very thing. Across the board, I can say this from 10 plus years of experience and studying research around wellness in workplace culture. I do see a significant number of neurodivergents who go into sales because they have this amazing personality that connects with multiple people very easily. They can retain a lot of information about what it is that they're trying to sell. And they also can switch gears quickly in terms of they know how to think on their feet in situations. The challenge to that is that sales is often for them a pressure cooker
Yeah.
because it creates that constant, like, you may have a day where you're like, I'm actually overwhelmed and really feeling moderately low, and like I need it to be a low key day. But now you're thrust into a role where that's not possible. Every day you're being forced to show up as a certain way. So, what I've seen, again, just looking at those I've worked with over the last 10 plus years, is a lot of them move as quickly as possible to being regional managers where they can help other salespeople do what they did well, or they do shift out into something different because there's a point where it's one thing to manage that when you're single. It's
Yeah.
another dynamic to
Yeah.
manage that, like, I need to go home and still have enough left to like talk to the person in my house.
Yeah.
Am I ringing
Yeah.
your bell?
I absolutely like nailed it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I feel so bad and sometimes I come home and my wife will be talking to me and she's like, Alex, are you thinking about work? And I'm like, yeah. And I
Mhm.
don't mean to, and I don't mean to.
Yeah.
It's just like that whatever particular day, I'm having a harder time as I'm getting older shutting
Shutting
that
down.
off and
Yes.
just the
Yeah.
winding down part for me is taking way longer,
Yeah.
especially if I don't train or move right after, even if it's just at the bare minimum a walk right after
Yes.
work.
And so I was literally going to say, then if we consider what wellness habits would support you, you need something to kind of quiet the brain and to
Yeah,
move that energy through. And I often encourage people to have some kind of workday shutdown ritual, which is
yeah,
an opportunity to kind of transition from one moment to the next. That can be really difficult too if you predominantly work from home. So there isn't that drive home where you can be listening to something and doing some
yeah.
deep breathing. But getting in 10 to 20 minutes of movement and or meditation, regardless of what you did that morning, will really help interrupt all that excess energy. Again, as a neurodivergent, I have to do the same. Have been married 25 years. It'll be 26 this year, which
Wow,
I know, which is
congrats. That's
crazy.
awesome.
Thank you.
Wow,
We
just like
got
that.
married very young. I know it goes so fast. I wouldn't trade it for anything. But even I will communicate. So this might be something that's helpful to your listeners. I will communicate to my spouse like towards the end of the day before I even get home. Man, today has been activating. I'm probably going to need like 30 minutes of decompression time. So I go ahead and let them know I'm going to walk through the door and not have a lot of words because I'm so overstimulated. I just need to change. I need to go hop on the Peloton for a minute, take a breath, do something mindless, and then I'm going to be much more ready to kind of receive your words. Otherwise, it can be really challenging because they're like, you've been giving everybody all your energy all day, but really just let them know it's not personal, but I need that buffer.
Right. That's fair. And I've been getting better at that too, of like telling my wife, like, hey, babe, like I just need like 20 minutes. I like
Mhm.
that immediately as I walk through the door to just move. And
Yeah,
a lot of times that's either weights or it's body weight, like hit training or
yeah,
like, and I've noticed then it's just like it flushes out that energy, right?
yes,
Because the energy can go way up to here,
yeah,
a lot of stimulation during the day, and then the only way for me to get it out is through movement. So
very
that's
true. It will
that's
take 3 or 4 times as long if you
yeah.
try to just let it hang there, and
Yeah.
then that's uncomfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. And what was another one I wanted to mention to you? Hmm. Oh yeah. Any more case studies about? I think we did touch on it a little bit of, but like patients or clients that created a new and improved mindset,
Mhm.
especially some patients or clients in the neurodivergent space that served
Yeah.
them better.
Yeah. So I have one neurodivergent CEO, and he and I have been working together for the past year. And interestingly enough, similar to what you were talking about, he was very kind of overly consumed with the perception of his staff towards him. And he's super nice guy, but he would definitely coin himself. We would jointly coin him as a people pleaser. So it's been very important for him to have everyone like him all the time, but that can be a conflict when you sometimes need to have difficult conversations. And it doesn't mean that he's an awful person, but people don't like hearing things that they don't want to hear. Or he was finding that he would delay his communication and having conversations that were really important for him to have because he would ruminate in his mind and think through it a million ways to try to figure out what's the perfect way that I can say it so that this person is going to respond. So we really spent a lot of time kind of first getting to the root of where did you stop feeling comfortable saying what you needed to say? Who gave you the message and the mentality that you have to say it perfectly? Then we kind of worked through the concept of assertive communication, which just means you're open and honest, not mean, but open and honest about what you need to say. And you feel comfortable that what you said was the right thing for you, regardless of the other person's response. And so, what that allowed him to do over the course of the year is to really build his confidence up around his voice, his truth, feeling like I did think it through enough that I can speak to it from a fair angle, but someone's response doesn't mean they're not pleased with me, and it doesn't mean that what I said was wrong. And that for him has significantly reduced his anxiety and just made him a much better communicator.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, because I feel like that's a big challenge for any manager, leader,
Mhm.
or CEO to relaying maybe difficult information or
Yes.
very uncomfortable information to staff, right? Like,
Mhm.
especially information that could potentially jeopardize their role, or let's say they're underperforming or whatever,
Yes.
and you're trying to do it again in a professional
Mhm.
manner without, you know, um, making them feel bad or yeah.
Yeah. But sometimes they're going to feel bad
Yeah.
because it's a tough
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes they're going to feel bad because they're really not doing their job. But then, even if we then take that to relationships because it went professional and then became a personal item for him as well because he realized, oh, I'm doing this in other areas, that I'm not always saying what I feel in the moment because I don't want to hurt my wife's feelings. And then it comes up later and she may go, well, why didn't you just, say that before? So it's a process, and it's important to know it's never too late to shift, to evolve, and to create new patterns in our lives.
No, I love that. Oh, yeah. I know we touched on this a bit, but like brain capacity and potential. I
Hmm.
see a lot in literature and articles and stuff like that. There's like one side saying some people are like, "Oh, your personality is fixed." But I'm a firm believer that our personality is um not fixed, but it's like it can be molded, it can be
Hmm.
crafted to something better.
Sure.
Like you still
Yeah.
have your, like you said, your core values and
Hmm.
principles that
Hmm.
you have grown up with and that are can be quite fixed,
Yeah.
can still be changed, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Of course, you can't change the core of who you are, but you can still evolve your personality and your
Correct.
traits.
Yeah.
So, what
Yeah,
is your
so
kind of
we have a fluent capacity to grow, right? That's the whole
yeah,
concept of neuroplasticity. It is our ability, as long as we are living and breathing, to create new ways of doing things. We talk about what you're mentioning when we say nature versus nurture. We
yeah,
may have certain parts of our nature that is inherent to who we are, but as humans, as long as there's nothing wrong with our cognition, we also know how to adapt those things. If we think about it, you talk to people completely different now than you did when you were in middle school, right? Because you have a completely, right, different level of vocabulary. So I always tell people, are you the same person that you were 10 years ago? And they were like, absolutely not. I've changed so much. And I'm like, you're proving my point. What I also find, if I'm really honest, is people that tend to lean towards a fixed mindset usually parallel with victim mentality,
Mm,
meaning they appreciate saying, I've always been this way, because then it abdicates their responsibility to change. But in truth, we all have fluid capacity to change our response, or to know, I know this about my nature. I'm really quick witted, or I'm very strong tongued. So then we have to decide, well, what kind of practices do I need so that that's not my automatic habit, because there's consequence to me being that way. But yeah, it's so important for us to recognize it is never too late for us to shift and grow and change our responses.
yeah, no, and that's something, especially nowadays, that the key word that comes to mind for me is adaptability. Like
Yes.
with our response, and then yeah, how we react, our response, and then how we communicate.
Yeah.
Being adaptable around that.
Yeah, and it goes back to that concept around your mind being an open parachute, right? A fixed mindset is going to be parallel to a closed mind. It's my way, it's what I think. I'm not open to hearing anything else. But when we have an open parachute in terms of our mind and that level of adaptability, it means I'm willing to take in new information and shift the way I show up while still being authentic to myself, but also being respectful of, it's not just about me, it's also about the people that are in my life that I care about.
Yeah, and that's like a big thing the shift from going from single to common law to married is
Yeah.
it's not about you, it's about us. Or it's not
Mhm.
about me, it's about us.
Yeah.
And that's a big shift that I had to make because I've always been pretty, selfish, self-centered, like thinking about myself and stuff. But
Yeah.
as soon as we, right, as soon as you add in like right, we got a dog, and then as soon as you get married, right, you start to, the mindset starts to evolve, and I have to
Yeah.
evolve with that, and not naturally, and because I'm in therapy, I like it because again, it's when you have a professional third party that they see it from the out, see your thoughts from the outside, and they're like, "Oh, wait a minute, wait a minute. You said it that way. Maybe
Yeah.
let's
Let's
why
try
don't we
that again.
let's reframe that a little bit differently."
Yeah, and you're like, "What? What's wrong?" Now, I will tell you this real quick. I do find that individuals who are single have a more fixed mindset. They have a much more difficult time the longer they've been single to be open because they're so used to things just being focused on their needs by nature. So get a dog, get a spouse. Just be around people and put yourself in situations that help make you adaptable.
Absolutely. But that's all the time we got for tonight there, Dr. Johnson. It was an absolute pleasure having you on the Mindset Podcast again. I would love to have you on the Mindset Podcast again. And where can our listeners connect with you, find you, get to know you a bit better?
Sure. The best place to find me is honestly on IG at